Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the content patch for the 14th of Feb 2013. My name is TotalBiscuit with today's gaming news and comments. Coming up in the show, there is controversy surrounding Aliens Colonial Marines and who actually made the game in the first place. We'll be delving into some supposed leaks from Gearbox Studios a little bit later on. Tribes Ascend to add a single purchase option, and Age of Wonders 3 has been announced, and the partnership is with none other than Notch of Minecraft fame himself. Well, I think you've probably all heard about the nonsense surrounding Aliens Colonial Marines and the fact that it sucks. I mean, this is now essentially common knowledge. This is, in fact, so factual that it would appear you could write it in Wikipedia without someone demanding its deletion. It might as well be part of the Encyclopedia Britannica, or indeed etched into stone tablets for future generations. The long and the short of it is that this game is a mess. Now, what you may not know, however, is exactly why. And there have been rumors circulating for the last few days that the game itself was not, in fact, developed by Gearbox for the most part, and it was outsourced to various different companies, including Timegate, who are in fact the makers of the shooter Section 8 Prejudice, which was definitely not a bad game. They're also the makers of Kohan, which was an absolutely fantastic strategy, and they were also responsible for the excellent Axis and Allies and the not-so-great expansions for the original Fear. So it's sort of a mixed history, really, especially when it comes to single-player. Section 8 Prejudice was strong in terms of the multiplayer, but its single-player was a little bit lousy, and of course, if we were to look at the original Section 8, you definitely have similar problems. And the reason I mention this is because an anonymous post from somebody claiming to be part of Gearbox says that the actual campaign itself was given to Timegate to handle, and Gearbox ended up simply handling the multiplayer, which is somewhat of a bizarre thing to do, considering the specialities of the different studios. If we're going to talk about Gearbox, then we're going to talk about games like Borderlands, of course, but we're also going to talk about Brothers in Arms as well, which was actually a pretty damn good single-player game. We're going to mention Half-Life Blue Shift and Opposing Forces. We're going to mention something like 007 Nightfire, which they were responsible for as well. I mean, they're certainly not terrible when it comes to single-player shooters, although, of course, they were responsible for Duke Nukem Forever. But the question is just how much were they really responsible for Duke Nukem Forever? I mean, that game's been around for a long time, and it's gone through various different studios and iterations, so the whole bloody thing was a mess. Now, it seems to be rapidly turning out that Aliens Colonial Marines has a similar problem to Duke Nukem, in the sense that it's been around for too long, and it didn't have this singular vision. It didn't have one studio consistently working on it. Now, in this case, between an article by Rock Paper Shotgun as well as the Reddit thread, there seems to be some absurd nonsense going on with the number of actual studios that were involved in this particular game. Now, the whole Timegate rumor has been knocking around for a while, and according to this post, Timegate was handling the single-player campaign, but there were 3 other studios involved in the eventual development of this game: Demiurge, Nerve, and Darkside, and it doesn't seem like anyone seems to really know what on earth is going on there, but it would appear that Demiurge, Nerve, and Timegate got involved with the development of the game once Gearbox decided to outsource because they were too focused on Borderlands 2. Now, in an IGN article, which was an interview with Randy Pitchford, he claimed that about 20 to 25% of the total development time was handled by Timegate. However, the source speaking to Rock Paper Shotgun indicates that this is a fabrication, and that it fails to take into account a not insubstantial amount of work put in by other studios, and it also claims that pre-production is a very insubstantial period in a game's development. For him to say that the contribution was equal sans pre-production is basically saying it's equal. So what that means is it looks like Timegate handled at least half, maybe even more of this game, but who knows what was happening with Demiurge, Nerve, and Darkside, those 3 other studios that were involved in it. I mean, it's just, this is just an absolute mess. Now, I could go on and on and on about the intricacies of this thing. You can read the Reddit post for yourself. You can read the Rock Paper Shotgun article for yourself. But what has blatantly happened here is that a studio has attempted to take on too much. has essentially refused to put their own IP on the back burner in favor of something that they signed a contract to do in 2006, and has grossly mismanaged the project, outsourced things all over the place, made a bloody mess of it, and quite frankly put themselves in a situation where Sega was so pissed off with them that they were about to sue Gearbox for not fulfilling their contractual obligations. I mean, you know, I'm not the biggest fan of Sega, as you were well aware, because, hey, you know, they have been going around rampaging when it comes to copyright claims on channels for Shining Force 3. You know, this is the reason why my boycott remains in place, and I'm not actually putting WTF is videos of Sega published games out there. But they're in the right here. You've got to see that they're in the right here. There's no way that Gearbox should have drug this out and should have put it on the back burner in favor of Borderlands, especially with Borderlands 2 as well. I can understand, hey, you develop Borderlands, it's a runaway hit, very cool, very successful IP. You look towards the sequel because you know you're going to make a lot of money on it, but hi, you signed a contract to make this other game. It's pretty anticipated. It uses a very venerable license, something that the fans are really looking forward to. I mean, you've got guys that have loved the Aliens franchise for 3 decades. That's crazy. People grew up with Aliens, essentially. And you're gonna completely screw the game up. You're gonna make yet another terrible licensed game and you're gonna shove it out the door because, hey, you know, what choice do you have? It is a crying shame. It is a mess, and I don't know who's to blame here, but it's fairly obvious that Gearbox can't get off scot-free. This is, of course, the second time they've been dealt this hand, and maybe, just maybe, you can feel a bit sympathetic about Duke Nukem. I mean, if this was going to be around for like 12 years, and it was going to take this time, it was going to be iterated upon and completely redone, it probably wasn't going to end up being very good. And it doesn't matter which studio took a hold of it. Hell, Valve could have taken it. It would have still sucked. Okay, fine, but this is not the same. Gearbox were given this license and they signed a contract to make this game, and the fact that they didn't do it, well, that is just dreadful. They screwed it up royally, and they disappointed a lot of people, and they have made a lousy title that was sold on the basis of marketing alone, and when it comes down to the actual transparency of the whole process, it was a mess. Nobody knew what happened until the game came out, and by the looks of it, even the press demo that was shown, this so-called vertical slice of gameplay, was pretty much a fabrication. This should be a black mark on the studio. It really should. And more to the point, why is it okay for a studio to put their name to something, essentially when we're getting to this stage where gamers are becoming more savvy about development history and the pedigree of the developer, and they can look at it and say, all right, well, I trust this developer because they had a good history. When is it okay to say, right, well, you know what, we're just gonna put it under the Gearbox name and then outsource it to a bunch of other companies? I mean, what would have happened if someone like Valve or Blizzard had done that? And we'd ended up with a terrible game there. You sully your reputation, but you're also essentially misrepresenting your game. This is not good business practice. Hi-Res Studios have announced that they will be adding a single purchase option to Tribes Ascend, a so-called Game of the Year edition, which is due for release in a couple of days' time. This will essentially allow you to unlock everything in the game, which up to this point has of course been a free-to-play title, and it will maintain that status going forward. Now, I spoke to Hi-Res themselves, who told me about the actual price tags themselves. They're claiming that the launch price will be $30, £21 or €24 via Steam, and those who have spent at least $1 in the past with Tribes Ascend will be getting a discounted price via the Hi-Res web store of $20, £14 or €16. The package itself contains all previous weapons, classes, and perks. Now, this is a fairly unusual move for a free-to-play game, which is kind of why this is worthy of discussion, I feel. How many times have you run across this little line on a forum? Oh, if only there was an option just to buy everything. I'd much prefer that to the free-to-play model. That seems to be getting quite a lot of momentum. And the reason it's getting a lot of momentum is that there are so many free-to-play games that it comes down to a time commitment. And the fact that people just simply cannot afford the amount of time that all of these free-to-play games seem to require in order to unlock all the stuff they want to play with. They also view the microtransaction model as exploitative and unnecessarily expensive. They simply want to be able to get into a game, not have to worry about leveling, and in their perception, grinding in order to receive the content that they so desire. Now, it's interesting to note, of course, that Tribes Ascend has been out for a little while. It's a game that I played a lot of. I stopped playing it when I just kind of got sick of the game, really. I played a reasonable amount of it, and it's probably like 40, 50, maybe even 60 hours of Tribes, I think, at a guess. And I had a lot of fun with it. I thought it was a really good shooter, definitely one of my favorite games of that year. But I was in the fortunate position of having a lot of people referred to the game by my videos, so I ended up in a situation where, oh, right, well, I just get all my stuff for free anyway. I think I have something like 68 million experience points or something like that, maybe even more than that. But whatever the case, there are two ways to perceive this. One is, oh, this is a really, really good move. And in my opinion, it is a really good move. This is the kind of thing which lets everyone catch up to a certain level, or essentially just buy the game for a reduced price, and then just play with all the classes and all the weapons. And there are a lot of weapons now. There's a fairly significant amount, and also extra perks and things like that. So you get quite a large amount of content there. And the other way of looking at it is, oh god, this game is dying, so this is a way to exploit the fact that it's dying and just make a bit of extra money before it gets dead and buried. Maybe, yeah, it very well could be. But I have this opinion, right? I think that you can't really kill a free-to-play game entirely until someone decides to simply shut it down. I think that you end up in this situation where free-to-play games go into this ebb and flow, and every time an update's released, it gets people back into the game. When there's a major business model shift like this, then you definitely end up in a situation where you could get people playing again because they think, oh, great, I can just go back into the game and get all of my weapons, and I can play with all the stuff I wanted to, but didn't have the time to deal with. So perhaps it brings life back to the game, perhaps it's just a spike in attention. But one way or the other, it's an excuse to play Tribes Ascend again. I haven't played in ages, and I'm thinking, you know what? I actually kind of would like to play Tribes again. I had fun with that game. I probably suck at it now more than I used to, but hey, I'll try it again. I'll see what the new weapons are like. I'll see what the new maps and the balance is like. It might be good, and they have also, of course, halved the experience cost of all of the items in the game, and that's kind of a big deal. So even if you don't want to buy everything, it's now a lot faster to unlock the items in the game than it otherwise would have been. So good moves, I feel, for Tribes Ascend, a game that is certainly suffering in terms of its population, and perhaps this will be what it takes to reignite enthusiasm for the free-to-play shooter. And finally, Age of Wonders 3 was announced about a week or so ago, and there were a number of rumors kind of flying around as to how exactly this game was going to be published. Now, the developer behind it is, of course, Triumph, and there were rumors about none other than Epic Games actually supporting this particular title, which would be a little bit weird, considering Age of Wonders is a turn-based strategy game, and it certainly has a very storied history, but it's not really the kind of thing that Epic would usually get involved in. Well, something very odd has happened indeed, because it would appear that the secret partner in this particular venture was none other than Marcus Persson, aka Notch himself of Minecraft fame, which is mind-blowing. And the fact that he's getting involved in something like this is pretty fantastic, quite frankly. Now, the story of it simply comes down to the fact that the guys themselves and Triumph and their co-owner Leonard Sass happened to have this demo, and they were talking to various parties as well as traditional publishers. They showed the demo off, and he claims that there was certainly interest, but the prospect of having Notch help fund us was a dream come true, as he's a fan of the game and didn't insist on owning it like many of the publishers do these days. It certainly didn't happen overnight, and he kept a healthy business sense towards the project. His biggest concern was that it would cost him a lot of time, so it helped that we made this sort of game before and we were at an advanced stage of development. Sass claims that the reason that he approached Notch in the first place for this project was that he saw a random title screen blurb which actually happened to mention Age of Wonders in Minecraft itself. Now, Age of Wonders 3 is scheduled for release in the autumn on PC, and there is a tablet and possible Mac version coming later. Now, the fact that there's a new Age of Wonders game coming out is that is wonderful in and of itself. Those of you who haven't played Age of Wonders, it is one of the top games on my recommended strategy game list over on GOG.com. Age of Wonders Shadow Magic. for the love of God, give it a try. Like, it is definitely a game that stands the test of time. It is a very strong turn-based strategy. You will probably notice a few similarities here and there with the Heroes of Might and Magic series, but what I will say for a fact is that that game is absolutely stellar. It is well worth your attention. The fact that we're getting a new one is awesome. The fact that it's being developed by Triumph, that's really good news too. So we're not talking about the franchise just being given to another developer that doesn't know what it's doing. These are the guys that made all of the Age of Wonders games. Age of Wonders 2, The Wizard's Throne, Age of Wonders Shadow Magic. This is great, and this is potentially fantastic. The only other games that Triumph made were the Overlord series. I mean, that basically means they haven't made a bad game. I mean, I liked the Overlord games. They weren't quite what I was looking for. They were pretty decent nonetheless. So I am kind of excited about this. You're going to have to forgive me if I am, and I'm sort of getting a little bit gibbery here. It's Age of Wonders. Age of Wonders is awesome. This is going to be a huge time sink. So my hope is that it doesn't suck, of course. You know, there's a really big problem with games like this, because you get these expectations, and it's been so long since the last Age of Wonders game. Shadow Magic came out in 2003, so it literally is a decade since the last Age of Wonders. This could be dreadful. I really hope that it's not. The screenshots look pretty promising, and hey, Notch is a pretty cool guy. Apparently, he funds Age of Wonders games and doesn't afraid of anything, so yeah. Looking forward to it. Hoping to get my hands on it pretty soon, and then we'll see whether or not it lives up to its predecessors. Okay, folks, that is me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the content patch, and I'll see you next time.